A stiff wind cut through the Winterfell ramparts. The Lannister brothers stood atop the battlements of Winterfell, gazing into the dead of night.
So what do you think?
Asked Lord Tyrion as he adjusted his cloak to further cover his throat.
I think it's bloody cold out.
Chuckled Sir Jaime, attempting to brave the severe chill in the air.
You know what I mean. Do you think we stand a chance?
I don't know. I haven't seen them fight. If we can get the dragon grounded, slay the giants and keep the army off the walls, then yes, we stand a good chance.
A tall order indeed.
Responded Lord Tyrion reluctantly as a third man had joined their meeting.
Indeed.
Agreed Lord Varys, who quietly approached them.
I'd ask if it was too cold a night to be walking the battlements, but the cold doesn't seem to bother you.
Yes, I'm freezing my balls off. Very amusing.
Mocked Lord Varys as Sir Jaime sighed, glanced at his brother.
Oh, it's all in good fun.
We do have more serious matters of discussion. I'm afraid the matter of your reacquaintance under the Red Keep and Cersei's forehand knowledge is troublesome indeed. My informants in the capital will be of little use to us, but if the information exists, it will not avoid me forever. Information is like a river, and the river must flow, despite the efforts of those who try and stop it.
Lord Varys sang as if it were a song. He abruptly stopped when they were joined by a fourth man. Jon Snow had approached Tyrion, Varys, and Sir Jaime. He was carrying what looked to be armor, Sir Jaime thought.
Good evening, my lords.
Greeted the king in the north.
Good evening, Your Grace. I see you also are out enjoying this tepid northern night.
Lord Tyrion mocked to King Jon's slight smile.
If I'm not interrupting, I was hoping to speak to Sir Jaime alone.
Of course, Your Grace, we were just departing.
Exclaimed Lord Tyrion with a slight bow. Lord Varys followed suit, and the two men stiffly exited their presence. Jon then offered the breastplate to Sir Jaime. He looked it over carefully, as it was not fresh forged and was well broken in. There were no sigils on the breastplate, and it definitely belonged to a northern house by the look of it.
I suppose I'll look like a proper Northsman.
Not until you stop shivering.
Responded Jon with his typical charming smile.
If you are pledged to House Stark, you should look the part. This armor once belonged to my brother Robb. If you'd rather not, I would understand.
I'd be honored, Your Grace.
Sir Jaime admitted, and an uncomfortable silence followed until Sir Jaime hastily decided to interrupt it.
The field's defenses are indeed properly planned.
Responded Sir Jaime, turning his attention back to the northern fields.
I wanted to ask your opinions on the matter. You're the most experienced battle commander here. Your advice would be most welcomed.
Jon finished, and Sir Jaime soaked up the compliment. It was true. Having Ned Stark's son recognize it as true was a different matter altogether.
The tiered trenches are quite impressive. They won't retreat. Or perhaps can't. I'd see if there was a way to close the choke points, if needed.
The wildfire and a good archer.
I was thinking the same.
Responded Sir Jaime with a wide grin.
Speaking of which, I mean no disrespect. But how are you at defending yourself?
Asked Jon, and Sir Jaime seemed lost in thought, as this did not go unnoticed by Jon. Jon opened his mouth to change the subject, but it was Sir Jaime that spoke first.
The Karstarks will have their revenge. It really doesn't matter who they choose. If I survive the dead, I won't escape death a second time.
Your survival is important to the realm. You may be able to liaise a peaceful transition between the queens.
Jon offered with a sense of optimism. Sir Jaime's grip on his hilt tightened.
Perhaps I should parley with the dead as well.
Grinned Sir Jaime, and Jon quickly returned it.
Stranger things have happened. I wanted to ask, would you be willing to command the battlements, the archers?
Inquired the king in the north, and Sir Jaime's face straightened.
You will be in the air.
Sir Jaime asked, and Jon nodded in agreement.
You would be appointing me commander of all your ground forces.
Sir Jaime stuttered, still bewildered at King Jon's inquiry.
I am. I can think of no one better.
You honor me again, Your Grace.
May I insult you then?
Jon asked abruptly, and Sir Jaime was slightly taken aback.
Your Grace?
Sir Jaime asked with a questioning tone as thick as the stiff winter's wind.
May I ask you something personal?
Of course, Your Grace, if you think it necessary.
Queen Cersei, you love her.
Asked Jon carefully as Sir Jaime was shocked at the topic.
If you think my loyalties are divided, I assure you.
Jon then interrupted Sir Jaime.
This isn't about loyalty. It's about love. It's about love. How did you get past the relations? To the relations? Forgive me.
Jon stuttered in his frustration. Sir Jaime realized this was more about Jon than Cersei. Sir Jaime then turned to face him as he placed his good hand on Jon's shoulder.
The gods are vile, vicious cunts who enjoy their ironies. The gods remove all our sense and treat us to a curse they call love. They think it's a fair trade, the bastards.
Testified a clearly scorned Sir Jaime. Jon saw the pain in his eyes as his confliction ran deep.
Falling in love is just an acceptable form of insanity. On a long enough timeline, each and every love story eventually becomes a tragedy.
Thank you, Sir Jaime.
Responded Jon to Sir Jaime's nod of appreciation.
When we hold our war council, I'd like any other input you may have.
I'm at your service, Your Grace. Before you depart, I wanted to return your family sword.
He drew the steel and offered Jon the sword. He stared at it for a moment of silent thought prior to responding.
I have more swords now than I know what to do with.
Jon responded as Sir Jaime's face slumped in disappointment.
Perhaps your sister, then?
Asked Sir Jaime, and Jon simply refused to acknowledge the offer.
May it serve you well in the battles to come, Sir Jaime.
Thank you, Your Grace.
Jon departed the battlements to join Queen Daenerys was Jaime's assumption. Sir Jaime had a lot to digest holding his northern armor. It's almost as if he felt like he belonged. He peered out onto the fields again to see a raven flying east. Queen Daenerys woke to see Jon getting dressed. Her dream slowly faded from her memory as she stared at her soon-to-be husband. The room was frigid, but Jon had the hearth's embers now roaring with heat. She sat up wishing she had woke first. She desperately wanted to wake him with her body, to take him inside her before his eyes had even opened. Instead, she attempted to tempt him before he donned his gambeson. Just before he lifted it over his head, he noticed her seductive glare, and just for a moment, her form gave Jon pause. It had only been a few hours since she last had her fill, but the queen still desired the attention of her king.
Where is my king headed at dawn?
She inquired, allowing the furs to no longer cover her form. Jon concentrated on affixing Longclaw to his side.
To the armory, then the northern fields to check on the men's progress.
Informed a clearly distracted Jon. Daenerys gracefully approached him as naked as the day she entered the world. Jon found it difficult to meet her eyes.
This is the last morning we will wake unmarried.
A thought that pleases me greatly.
Smiled Jon as he embraced her. She kissed him passionately as a means to keep him abed before a gentle knock rang at the door. She continued kissing him regardless as Lady Missandei entered the room and offered her services.
Go now, Jon Snow. I shall greet you under the weirwood at sundown.
The night can't come quick enough, my queen.
The night is coming for us all, my king. But not until I'm done with you.
It appears the Night King will have to wait his turn.
I couldn't help but notice your choice of swords.
Claimed Queen Daenerys. Her eyes shifted toward the bedroom table where Blackfire rested.
A lot of new things to get used to. One at a time, my queen.
Jon finished before he departed. Once they were alone, Queen Daenerys bathed, then Missandei started the long process of braiding her long silver hair.
The gown is impressive, my queen.
Claimed Missandei, and Queen Daenerys shortly stared at the flowing blood-red gown. Fitting for a Targaryen, she thought.
I spoke with the Tarly son, as you commanded.
Is there any progress on that front?
I believe so. The symbols the dead are leaving behind appear to be Old Tongue.
Can they be interpreted?
Loosely, but a wildling may be able to offer us more specifics.
She informed her queen while gently brushing her long silver hair that now nearly reached her waist.
Please keep me informed.
Queen Daenerys poured herself a glass of wine as the hour approached midday. Grey Worm and Ser Jorah had stopped by to offer their congratulations. Another knock at the door as Lord Tyrion and Lady Sansa entered.
You wish to see us, Your Grace?
Asked her hand. Queen Daenerys noticed how Lord Tyrion consistently utilized his peripheral to take note of all of Lady Sansa's actions.
Indeed I did. I wanted to hear your thoughts, or secure your blessings, Lady Sansa.
I know you love my brother, and he loves you as well.
So you approve?
Queen Daenerys asked with what she had hoped to be a genuine curiosity.
If my opinion means anything, Your Grace, I do. Joining our houses is the best option I see for the Seven Kingdoms.
7 kingdoms.
Asked Queen Daenerys, attempting to mask her surprise at Lady Sansa's surrender.
Jon is our king. You will be our queen, and our kingdoms will prosper, no doubt.
Lady Sansa was flattering, yet her look was cold.
Thank you, Lady Sansa. Please know I bear no ill will towards the situation that brought us here.
Likewise, Your Grace.
Responded Lady Sansa with a slight bow. She promptly exited the room and Lord Tyrion turned toward his queen, exhaling for the first time since the ladies ended their conversation.
Your thoughts?
Queen Daenerys asked Lord Tyrion. For the first time he seemed to be short on words. He collected his thoughts carefully before responding.
The North will follow their king. They have nothing better to do. It will be a strong alliance. His lineage should be kept quiet. Otherwise the North could rebel. The Targaryen intermarriages were widely accepted once. But now it's a different time. We would be wise to not test their newfound allegiances.
I'm not sure how much more I need to sacrifice to win their allegiance.
They are relentless, no doubt.
I can't help but notice how much time you spend in the presence of the Lady of Winterfell.
Political, brokering alliances, Your Grace.
Stuttered Lord Tyrion, and Daenerys smiled, clearly enjoying her torture of Tyrion.
She's beautiful, intelligent, and comes from the noblest of houses. And you were already married.
Queen Daenerys observed, smiling widely. Lord Tyrion now was clearly blushing.
Was there somewhere I was to escort you, Your Grace?
Lord Tyrion asked impatiently, now clearly trying to change the subject.
Yes, I have alliances to broker for myself.
Queen Daenerys finished. Lord Tyrion, Varys, and a handful of Dothraki escorted her down to the Winterfell forges. The forges were busy. At least 24 men were feverishly stacking blades and arrowheads. 5 more men were affixing dragon glass to unsullied long spears. Gendry, Arya, and the Hound stood on the far side of the room as Gendry was scratching Ghost's head.
He's so taken to you.
He's barely left since we arrived. Eats and sleeps here too.
Gendry Rivers, I presume.
Yes, Your Grace. But I never was actually granted the surname of Rivers.
Replied Gendry as Arya and Sandor rose to watch the conversation.
So you are Robert Baratheon's son? With the death of his brothers, the Baratheon name will die out. King Robert's last act before he died was to retract the order to have me murdered. Or so I am told.
Queen Daenerys paused and nodded towards Lord Varys. He returned her courtesy with a low bow.
My spies have informed me that no liege lord has been chosen in the Stormlands, as of yet. The lesser houses are still debating, albeit peacefully.
Gendry gestured to the nearby smith who was working anvil and hammer. The smith fell silent as the Queen then continued.
I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but the Targaryens and Baratheons share blood. Your house was created by Aegon the Conqueror himself.
It's not my house, my queen. I remain a bastard.
Lord Tyrion.
Stated the Queen simply. Lord Tyrion slightly cleared his throat, and all work in the forges now ceased without order.
Let it be known that on this day, Queen Daenerys Stormborn, of the House Targaryen, rightful queen of the Andals and the First Men, does in fact proclaim Gendry Rivers as the last of the Baratheons and the Lord of Storm's End, to be held by his sons and grandsons, from now until the end of time.
Lord Tyrion concluded and gently rolled up the parchment. Gendry Baratheon then knelt before his queen.
You honor me, my queen. House Baratheon pledges itself once again to House Targaryen and the Dragon Queen.
Lord Gendry finished, his head still bowed.
Rise, Lord Gendry of Storm's End. I accept your oath of fealty, and vow never to ask anything of your house that would bring you dishonor.
Applause erupted from the forges, and the hound clapped him on the back that made him lose his balance. He fell straight into Arya's grasp. Neither two backed away from each other. After a moment, Lady Arya simply whispered,
Congratulations, my lord.
Queen Daenerys sensed the tension between the young friends.
Lord Gendry, would you do me the honor of escorting Lady Arya to the royal wedding this evening?
It would be my honor, your grace.
Surely the forges can stand your absence for an hour or two. It is our desire to not interrupt preparations. Only 20 or 30 lords and ladies will be in attendance. I shall see you at sundown, my lord.
The Queen finished and was escorted from the forges. Queen Daenerys and Lord Tyrion continued their conversation while en route to her chambers.
If there is something on your mind, my lord Hand, please speak it.
The last known challenge to the Targaryen reign was a young Baratheon. I wonder if it wise to raise this house up from the ashes when it was so desperate to destroy itself.
A wise position, my lord. If the Targaryens were to remain dragonless, unless House Baratheon was to raise a fire-breather to challenge me, their loyalty will do nothing other than to inspire others to bend the knee.
Queen Daenerys exclaimed, and Lord Tyrion seemed to agree. Her hand quickly attempted to change the subject as they trotted back to the Queen's chambers. Lord Tyrion voiced his observation. Queen Daenerys approached her door as it was opened by her guard.
Very astute of you to have Lord Gendry escort Lady Arya tonight.
As I informed you before, Lord Tyrion, a woman knows. It's partially the reason I asked you about Lady Sansa.
Smirked Queen Daenerys as she closed the door on a dumbfounded Lord Tyrion. Jon was dressed in his finest cloak. His hands shook as he attempted to fasten it around his shoulders. Lady Sansa and Lady Arya were visiting his chambers.
Never thought I'd see the day.
Smiled Lady Sansa as Arya walked over to Jon. She straightened his cloak and took his face in her hands.
Father would be so proud of you.
Arya whimpered, attempting to keep her composure. Jon gently grasped her wrists and lowered her hands into his own.
There is something I need to tell you.
Jon admitted. He caught Sansa's eye from across the room. She knew the subject of the conversation and seemed embarrassed by her attempted manipulation of it.
I am not your father's son.
Not this again.
Exclaimed Arya, and Lady Sansa still would not engage in the conversation. Jon was attempting to reveal this information to allow Sansa to save face. Her reaction was one of deep reluctance.
Lyanna Stark was my mother, and Rhaegar Targaryen was my father.
Jon revealed to nothing more than silence. Lady Sansa's face remained stern and Arya's mouth was agape.
How do you know?
Asked Arya, though her demeanor caught Jon off guard.
Bran, although you don't seem surprised.
I always assumed it was something like that. Father never would have fathered a bastard. I never believed it.
Lady Arya exclaimed as her eyes shifted over to a stirring Lady Sansa.
What should we call you then?
My name is Jon, and always will be.
Jon clarified, and Lady Sansa carefully approached him and chose her words with care.
You are my brother. You are a Stark. You are my king, and always will be.
Exclaimed a stern-faced Lady Sansa. The three shared an emotional embrace, and the ladies left their brother to himself. Jon held back his emotion as he looked to secure his sword to his side. He looked at the two sitting against the wall. It was an impossible choice, Longclaw or Blackfyre, Stark or Targaryen. Jon picked up both swords and briskly exited his chamber. Night had fallen on the castle, their defenses near completion. The men deserved a night off. All scouts had reported that the dead were still over a day away. Tonight, he knew the men could relax, but Jon was still nervous. Could it be the first time he cared what others thought? This was the way of the Targaryens, and he just so happened to love this woman. How many Targaryen men could say the same? Jon thought. A light snow fell in the courtyard as it was silent as a crypt. Ser Jorah Mormont walked towards Jon, leaving a trail of footprints behind him.
I'm to escort the Queen to the Godswood.
Informed Ser Jorah, Jon thought he meant to say more, but he had refrained himself. Jon was still carrying a sheathed longclaw in his hand.
I wasn't there when your father needed me, but I led the mission to bring those responsible to justice. I drove this sword through his mutineer's skull, and the Lord Commander was properly avenged. A man should carry the weight of his family on his back, good or bad.
He finished by handing Longclaw to Ser Jorah.
Embrace your old family, Ser Jorah, and I'll embrace my new one.
Asked Jon with his hand on Blackfire's hilt. Jon wasn't sure if he'd crossed a line, offering it to him for a second time. To Jon's surprise, Ser Jorah accepted it without a word.
I shall fetch your bride, then, your grace. I must say she's much more excited now than during her first wedding.
Ser Jorah finished. Jon continued on to the Godswood along the lighted path. Jon was finally standing under the weirwood, next to Ser Beric. Snow fell around the lit torches, lighting Queen Daenerys' path. Her blood-red gown contrasted the falling snow as she passed Lord Gendry, Lady Sansa, Arya, and Bran. Ser Jorah escorted the Queen past Grey Worm, Messendai, Lord Tyrion, and Sir Jaime. Jon had never seen a more beautiful sight in his life. Ser Beric had spoken first and broke the ominous silence, summoning the attention of the gods, both old and new.
Who comes before the old gods this night?
Asked Ser Beric as thick flakes fell from the heavens blanketing the wedding party below.
Daenerys Stormborn of the House Targaryen. She comes here to be wed.
Answered Ser Jorah of her Queensguard, a Targaryen queen on one arm and the glistening ruby eyes of Longclaw resting under the other.
She comes to beg the blessings of the old gods. Who comes to claim her?
Jon Snow, the king in the north. Who here gives her?
Ser Jorah of House Mormont, sworn guardian of the rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms.
Queen Daenerys then took her place at Jon's side as the pair turned to face Ser Beric. Words older than time were exchanged under the blessing of the old gods. Ser Beric finally asked the key question to the pair of monarchs.
Queen Daenerys, do you take this man?
I do take this man.
Answered a smiling Queen Daenerys.
King Jon, do you take this woman?
I will take this woman.
Answered an elated King Jon.
Before gods and men, I pronounce these two souls binded as one. Let neither light nor darkness keep them apart. Lords and ladies, I give you the rightful king and queen of the Seven Kingdoms.
Ser Beric finished to applause, and the monarchs kissed for the first time as man and wife. Jon thought of all the moments he shared with his siblings in these woods as a child. Even the pending doom approaching their doorstep could not dampen their spirits. The main hall was filled with noise, drinking, and conversation. The lords and ladies were enjoying themselves, but the mood was somber. No doubt the lingering northern threat was sobering, despite the large amounts of drink being put to good use. Queen Daenerys had refused to force the title of consort upon Jon, citing him as the rightful king in the north, granting the north its independence, then reuniting the kingdoms under the banner of marriage seemed the most prudent course. The occasional toast to the new king and queen and the new lord of Storm's End were met with occasional cheers. Queen Daenerys was in conversation with Missandei as Lord Varys approached his new king.
I pray for a long and prosperous reign, my king.
It just may be the shortest reign in history.
Our immediate futures are in question, no doubt. but the past is where I spend a great deal of my attention. I couldn't help but notice a new sword at your side for the ceremony.
A wedding gift.
Quickly retorted Jon with an innocent grin.
Curious? From anyone I know?
I presume the spider knows a great many people.
Not many wedding gifts become formidable weapons. Your bride, for instance, was given 3 dragon eggs during her first wedding. A fitting symbol of House Targaryen.
Lord Varys finished, and Jon was unsure if he had made his point.
Curious that you would also be given a symbol of House Targaryen on your own wedding day.
Varys concluded, and Jon covered his hilt with a gloved hand.
Is it that obvious?
Jon whispered, his eyes scanning the hall to see who was paying the pair of them any mind.
Only to those who are paying attention, Your Grace. The sword is intriguing, but what I found curious is how you came across it.
You know its previous safekeeper?
I've heard rumors.
Taunted Varys, Jon thought him to be deliberately passively aggressive.
It would be best if you failed to indulge these rumors any longer.
Ordered Jon sternly, but under his breath. Lord Varys then bowed slightly.
I only meant to advise, Your Grace.
No sooner had the conversation ended between Varys and Jon that goblets and fists started pounding the table. Jon had known what this meant. He addressed the crowd that Sir Beric was to escort the Queen and Miss Anday would escort the King to their private chambers, a custom that bothered the Queen very little, but the King was slightly embarrassed. Jon scanned the crowd to locate Lord Varys, but the spider had scurried out of sight. Jon was pulled from the high table and promptly exited the hall for the bedding. Sir Jaime, Lord Tyrion, and Tormund Giantsbane were seated together. Half of Tormund's stein had already spilled across the table.
I love me a good wedding.
And why is that, I wonder?
Asked Sir Jaime while emptying his own goblet.
Mostly the drinking.
Tormund gleefully retorted. Lord Tyrion refilled his glass, glaring at Tormund, half annoyed, half amused.
You'll find our customs may not differ entirely,
informed a rather drunk Lord Tyrion.
If you would excuse me, I have to chuck a piss.
Lord Tyrion clumsily pushed back from the table and made his way out of the hall. Sir Jaime watched as Tormund slowly slid down the adjacent wall and eventually slumped into a mass on the stone floor. Lord Tyrion leaned against the stables, cock in hand, relieving himself to the dismay of the steeds within his earshot. He then heard a voice from over his shoulder.
Is it really that cold out? Or is it just because you're a dwarf?
Proclaimed a hooded figure. Lord Tyrion casually turned midstream and ended up pissing on the stranger's boots. Lord Tyrion squinted to identify the stranger, who darted behind a manger. No sooner the confused look was wiped from his face.
Good evening, Sir Bronn.
Lamented Lord Tyrion as Sir Bronn lowered his hood.
You are in luck. There are extremely free and equally terrible drinks being drained by the barrel.
Not here for the drinking this time, my Lord Hand.
Then why are you here? Too cold for your taste, you once said.
Aye, that it is. Just looking out for myself, that's all.
That's all he's ever been capable of.
Exclaimed Sir Jaime, now coming into Lord Tyrion's view despite the falling snow.
Just the 2 conts I've been looking for. The Queen has a large price on both of your heads.
Sir Bronn revealed with a measured delight.
Naturally.
Professed a drunk Tyrion with a low bow.
It's such a fantastic head.
I bring Cersei both your heads, and I'm the new Lord of the Reach.
Sir Bronn revealed. Lord Tyrion had assumed a steep price for his life, but promising the Reach for both her brothers, he now knew Cersei to be desperate.
If I get the Dragon Queen as well, Cersei will give me the 7 kingdoms, and her little royal twat.
Taunted Sir Bronn. Sir Jaime charged and attempted to unsheath Widow's Wail. Sir Bronn had a dagger at Jaime's throat before he could blink.
Give me a damn reason, Kingslayer. Maybe a few years ago you'd have me, but those days are long gone.
Why can't I take a piss in public without being threatened or kidnapped?
Asked Lord Tyrion to himself as he continued to lean against the stables.
The only reason you're still breathing is I want to hear what you'd offer for your own life.
Demanded Sir Bronn, still holding his knife to Jaime's throat.
I'll accept these acts of hostility, but only because I'm enjoying your company so much. I can't do better than Highgarden, but you're not here to kill anyone yet. We are obviously the easier targets, but why not start with Daenerys? You, like us, know she's the only way we defeat the dead. You need her alive for now, at the very least.
Aye. Cersei looks to be on the losing side of a three-sided war. What's the point of living in the Red Keep if it burns down, or ice is over? You better make your offer soon. I'm not the only sword Cersei sent north.
Lord of the Reach and a seat on the small council.
That'll do. Normally I wouldn't take the word of a drunken dwarf.
Taunted Sir Bronn as he sheathed his dagger.
In the wine's defense, I've made poor decisions while perfectly sober.
Retorted Lord Tyrion, and Sir Bronn slowly distanced himself from Jaime.
I will end you,
whispered a furious Sir Jaime.
You can't jerk off with your left hand. I've already killed you. I just haven't decided when.
Sir Jaime was dumbstruck, his face as scarlet as his traveling cloak. Sir Bronn ducked into the stables and quickly out of sight.
His narcissism was always so intriguing.
I'm aware of your fondness of the Blackwater Knight, brother. I'll need to know where you stand, should I meet him again.
Given the events of tonight, certainly not in between you two.
Giggled Lord Tyrion as he stumbled through the snow en route to the main hall.
Seriously, Tyrion.
Stated a slightly perturbed Sir Jaime. Lord Tyrion sighed and stared at the night sky. His exhaled breath fogged the air just above his head.
May the bridges we burn light our path forward.
Lamented Lord Tyrion. This did very little to deter Sir Jaime's foul mood. Lord Tyrion ordered the Queen's Guard to double for the night. The brothers returned to the main hall, stepping over a snoring Tormund Giantsbane, still conversing over their predicament.
Daenerys defeats the dead, Bronn then kills us. He owns Highgarden at the very least.
Explained Lord Tyrion, now slightly more sober.
Cersei offered her hand, not for us, but for Daenerys.
Explained a shocked Sir Jaime. His face now returned to its normal color.
She's scared, maybe for the first time. I doubt she means it, do you?
Inquired Lord Tyrion, to which Sir Jaime let out a deep sigh across from his brother.
My head says no, but my gut says yes.
Responded Sir Jaime reluctantly. The noise of the hall returned as the pair sat opposite each other. Sir Jaime filled both their goblets, to which Lord Tyrion accepted gladly.
Go with your gut, then.
And why is that, I wonder?
Because one's head is a fool, and the heart is a fucking idiot.
Responded Lord Tyrion, finishing his glass. Sir Jaime glared at Lord Tyrion, thinking he would get at least an outburst, until Jaime laughed and finally smiled at his brother. He then poured another glass for him.
You're always better company when there is a flagon between us.
Laughed Sir Jaime. Lord Tyrion leaned forward and clinked his brother's glass.
An empty flagon, my dearest brother.
Queen Cersei was beneath the Red Keep, glaring up at Balerion's skull. Surely Bronn and Strickland had reached Winterfell by now, she thought. Her impatience at the lack of news was surpassed only by the deed she wanted completed in the first place. The destruction of her family was clearly Tyrion's motive from the start. Now the half-man had convinced her love, the only one that mattered to her, to take up arms against her. For that, he shall die, she thought. A world without Jaime is not one she desired, but perhaps their child will fill the void Jaime had left behind. The capture of Arya was the thing she thought she desired most, watching her being walked into the throne room like a dog on a leash. It was gratifying, to say the least. But Tyrion, she was disappointed she hadn't devised a better plan to humiliate her brother and reciprocate her pain onto him. He was responsible for the death of her mother, her father, her firstborn son, and eventually Jaime's death as well. She continued to stare at the beast that conquered the Seven Kingdoms. Was strength really that simple for the Targaryen family? Nevertheless, they were effective. The only significant rebellions against the Targaryens were infighting, until Robert, she thought. Her eyes then shifted off the dragon skull as Qyburn came down the narrow stairs, torch in hand.
Your Grace.
He spoke softly as not to wake the dead beasts before them.
Have we located Euron Greyjoy?
The Queen asked while returning eye contact with the dragon's skull.
I'm afraid not, my Queen. And only a handful of his ships remain afloat. Although my sources have confirmed our earlier intelligence, the wall has indeed fallen, and the dead march on Winterfell.
And what of the missing dragon?
Queen Cersei asked. She already knew the answer, but reveled in the satisfaction of hearing it again from anyone who would speak of it.
It is as we had hoped, killed beyond the wall and resurrected.
Good. That is good news. Is there any word from Sir Bronn or Captain Strickland?
From them, no, Your Grace. There is news concerning one of them.
Qyburn finished. This intrigued Cersei as she finally turned to face her hand.
From our mutual friend, I presume?
Asked the Queen before sipping from her goblet.
Yes, indeed. He has finally arrived in Westeros. He tells us that the King in the North has wed the Dragon Queen. But more importantly, he is carrying Blackfire.
The lost Targaryen sword?
Indeed, the very same, Your Grace.
Answered Qyburn, impressed at her knowledge of the realm's history. The pair turned from Balerion and began to walk down the rows of dragon skulls.
Legend places the sword back in Essos at least a century ago. Its reappearance is quite curious.
How so?
Asked the Queen, again feigning ignorance in order to have her own thoughts repeated back to her.
I have an assumption that, if correct, only allows for two distinct possibilities.
Qyburn continued, now having Cersei's full attention.
My assumption is that Captain Strickland carried the sword westward. He was either killed during his mission, or has pledged himself to the Targaryen girl.
Pledged? How so?
Asked Queen Cersei blankly with a slight tilt to her head.
I regrettably must inform you to the past oath. The founders of the Golden Company hold to a branch of Targaryen bastards. The Golden Company has a centuries-old pledge to the Blackfire bloodline. Whether it is still honored, only time will tell.
Something I should have been made aware of. Still, mercenaries fight for gold, not blood. How shall we proceed then?
If the good captain returns with his mission incomplete, we shall know his true intentions, and should respond accordingly.
Very good. Please inform his lieutenant, Sir Hunt, that I would like to speak with him immediately.
Queen Cersei finished as she took one last look at the remnants of the Targaryen dynasty and started the climb up the same narrow stairwell. Lady Sansa stood atop the battlements of Winterfell. She enjoyed the early morning air, unlike the stench of King's Landing. These opportunities were fewer by the day, as the daylight only lasted a few hours, even in these early days of winter. Lady Sansa then noticed a large man walking towards her, slightly shivering but wearing it well. He stopped a few steps from her as Lady Sansa turned to face him. Sandor Clegane stood before her. Still, Lady Sansa did not speak.
You once couldn't stand the sight of me. Now it seems you could look straight through me.
I've had to face quite a few of my fears recently.
I wanted to. I just thought, I'm bloody sorry for what I said about your future sons being murderers. It is true, just not what you needed to hear at that moment. Some truths are better left to be found out for your damn self.
I had to grow up faster than I would have liked. You were right about many things.
I heard you executed Littlefinger right here in Winterfell. Perhaps you do know how the world works. Could I make one request of the Lady of Winterfell?
Requested the Hound, and Lady Sansa nodded in agreement.
Don't bring any of that King's Landing bullshit up here. It'll get someone you care about killed.
The hound finished, and on his last word he briskly walked past Lady Sansa, not bothering to hear her retort. She stayed atop the battlements for a while, contemplating the advice she received when her one-time husband had crossed her path.
Awfully small castle for us to continue avoiding each other.
I'd assume a fair amount of criticism would be in order.
Whatever for, milady.
My complicity in the murder of the king, for electing to remarry, or perhaps conspiring to deny the throne to Prince Rhaegar's son, even blackmailing the Dragon Queen.
Yes, it took a bit of my best to ensure the Queen your actions would have differed very little from mine own, given the circumstances.
After which she decided to marry Jon. On your advice, I presume.
It was an obvious countermove. So obvious I'm surprised you attempted to strong-arm her at all. Unless you wanted them to marry.
Lord Tyrion surmised, and Lady Sansa made no attempt to deny it. She half attempted to suppress an agreeable grin to Lord Tyrion's surprise.
I don't think you are aware of just how brilliant that particular plot could work out for you.
How so, my lord?
The Queen ensured that the blood of Eddard Stark was to rule the North. For as long as they remain married, the Seven Kingdoms will remain united. What you are not aware of is that Queen Daenerys cannot bear any more children. If their marriage were to remain monogamous, the North would have to pass to another Stark after King Jon's death, given his lack of heirs.
Mine own children.
Lady Sansa breathed, although Lord Tyrion was again surprised at her lack of a response. After a few silent moments had passed, he again addressed her.
So not only have you negotiated the North its independence, but perhaps even placed your own children on a weirwood throne in place of Jon's. Impressive, milady. But I assume you already knew this.
I usually come up here to think...
Anything interesting?
Your sister.
Far more interesting thoughts could warrant your attention, I assure you. I can't imagine the atrocities you have suffered here in your own home.
Lord Tyrion, you may be the only person alive who actually could understand.
Lady Sansa admitted as the two of them made a prolonged eye contact. The pair proceeded down to the courtyards and saw something that made her confused. Bran was atop a horse, and Lady Sansa approached him feeling a bit like her mother.
Bran, what are you doing?
Meeting a friend.
Bran answered Lady Sansa's demand. She inspected the customized saddle and associated braces that kept him upright. Lady Sansa shot an icy glare over to Lord Tyrion, as she knew of his original design for Bran all those years ago.
Is riding out to meet them really necessary?
It is, in fact.
Dare I ask why?
Last time he came to Winterfell uninvited. I want to rectify that this time.
Answered Bran as a horn blew announcing riders returning. Bran trotted off on his unusual saddle. He passed through the southern gate, across the fields, and out of sight. Queen Daenerys, Grey Worm, Missandei, and Ser Jorah marched across the courtyard. Lady Sansa realized that Jon's war council was to be held at daybreak. Lord Tyrion then garnered Lady Sansa's attention.
May I escort you to the war council, milady?
Of course, Lord Tyrion. I do appreciate your plans for Bran's saddle. Having him mobile will give us an advantage.
I can't help the feeling he is more central to this battle than he is letting on.
You and me both.
Lady Sansa revealed as the pair walked towards the library. Lady Arya then joined her sister and Lord Tyrion.
Have you seen Gendry?
I doubt he's seen daylight this past week.
Answered Lord Tyrion as he sidestepped the cluttered courtyard.
I'm sure he'll be at the War Council. We'll need an update on the state of the armory. Also, Arya. Jon mentioned he has specific plans for us. It would be best not to argue until afterwards.
Why would I argue?
Asked Arya as Lady Sansa had expected her to.
He wants to make use of your survival skills.
Answered Lady Sansa. Arya scowled at the prospect of being told what to do. Just then the gates to the courtyard burst open, and Lady Sansa spun to see the commotion. Half a dozen wildlings charged hard through the gate, led by a fiery Tormund Giantsbane. Lady Sansa noticed Jon walking briskly out to meet them.
The daytime scout team.
Announced Lord Tyrion to the Stark sisters, apparently answering their question before being asked.
Daytime?
We send out teams at dawn and dusk. We expect them to return with news of the enemy movements as the sun sets or rises. If they don't return as scheduled.
Lord Tyrion was then interrupted.
Then we know they're close.
Lady Sansa finished his sentence. Lady Sansa and Lord Tyrion walked towards Queen Daenerys to listen to Jon's briefing. Jon turned away from Tormund with a determined look on his face. He made eye contact with Sansa as they both walked towards the Queen. Lady Sansa didn't need to hear the report, for she already knew.
The scouts were ambushed, my queen, 3 dead, but the rest were able to return.
How long?
Asked the Queen, and the rest of the courtyard held its collective breath.
Tonight, my queen.
Another horn blasted as Bran and his horse entered the courtyard, followed by a brash Theon Greyjoy and dozens of fellow Ironborn. Theon dismounted and approached Jon and Daenerys. He knelt with confidence as Sansa noticed his long hair was tied back. Theon was wearing it as a true northerner.
We heard of your uncle and his fleet. Was it your doing?
It was. Yara is safe and has sailed to White Harbor. She awaits your orders.
Surely you are not here to deliver and return a simple message?
Asked the Queen. With these words, Theon Greyjoy stood to his full height.
I've settled one debt and delivered my homeland from a tyrant.
Theon paused and then turned to Jon.
I'd like to settle my last debt and defend my actual home.
Jon embraced Theon and exchanged no words. Theon broke the embrace with glossy eyes and a straight back.
I've brought you a wedding gift. The 50 best archers in all of Westeros and 4,000 arrows.
Iron archers would be a welcomed addition.
Responded Jon, and then Queen Daenerys spoke next.
My king, I believe it is time.
Queen Daenerys announced, and King Jon agreed. The living exited the courtyard led by Queen Daenerys, followed closely by her entourage. Lady Sansa walked alongside Jon and whispered for only him to hear.
Is that the first time she's called you that in public?
It is, in fact.
Answered Jon, trying to hide an appreciative smile. The lords and ladies representing all corners of Westeros were now gathered around a small table in the Winterfell library. At the head of the table was Jon, Queen Daenerys, Sir Davos, and Lord Tyrion. Numerous others stood shoulder to shoulder surrounding them. The rest of the knights, lords and ladies waited in anticipation for Jon's briefing. He stood with Ghost at his side to address the attentive crowd.
First off, I'd like to thank you all for your hard work in preparation for these last few weeks. It's possibly been the largest undertaking since the wall itself was built. The Free Folk Scouts return this evening with expected news. The dead arrive tonight.
Jon gulped. Given the room was crowded, the only noise in between Jon's sentences were the crackling of the wall torches.
The dragon salvos have been effective. We estimate nearly a third of their army has been destroyed, but what remains is massive. We assume their approach will be from the north, by northeast. They will find no easy conquest. Lord Gendry, what is the state of the armory?
Your Grace, the armory has produced 8,000 spearheads, 2,000 axes, 10,000 daggers, 2,000 long swords, and 40,000 arrowheads. The battlements, courtyard and choke points of the trenches were also reinforced with the dragon glass.
Is there any further assistance we can be to you?
No, Your Grace. The last arrows are being fitted by the Ironborn as we speak.
Very well. The battle will have 3 objectives. Keep the dead off the walls of Winterfell, ground their dragon, and finally, kill the Night King himself. Sir Jaime Lannister, commander of all ground forces. How do you plan on accomplishing our first objective?
Sir Jaime walked towards the head of the table as to illustrate the castle's complex defenses.
It's a simple divide and conquer technique. The largest concern is slowing the initial onslaught. A 3-tiered trench system was developed to accomplish this. The stakes rise nearly 12 feet into the air and are just as wide, with 2 distinct gaps.
wide enough for 2 men to pass. These choke points will be armed with wildfire to close them if needed. The space between the first and second trench will be manned by 3,000 Dothraki, commanded by Ser Jorah Mormont.
Sir Jaime nodded in his direction, and then Ser Jorah then spoke up.
The Dothraki will ride in 500-man waves, riding east to west, then back again. The dead who make it into the second trench will then again be filtered through 2 separate gaps loaded with wildfire.
Ser Jorah finished, and Sir Jaime then continued.
The second space will be manned by the Unsullied, commanded by Grey Worm. 8,000 Unsullied will remain in formation in between the second and third trench and operate the catapults located within the final trench. The space defended by the Unsullied will have 2 access points on either sides of the horseshoe-shaped field. This will allow for an Unsullied retreat or reinforcement if needed. If the dead attempt to use the access points to escape the Unsullied, the west flank will be manned by the Knights of the Vale, commanded by Sir Royce. The east flank will be composed of the Northmen and Free Folk, commanded by Lady Brienne and Tormund Giantsbane. 1,000 mounted Vale and Northern cavalry will be located inside the third trench that wraps around Winterfell in its entirety, as our last defense to the walls of Winterfell. Sir Beric, I charge you with our last line of defense.
Sir Jaime finished, and Sir Beric nodded in agreement.
Lastly, the Ironborn will be atop the battlements with myself and Ser Davos, along with assorted archers who have proven their worth.
Informed Sir Jaime as he turned to Jon.
Your Grace, this is how I believe we can protect the walls and complete the first objective.
Finished Sir Jaime, and Jon was the next to speak.
While the trenches will slow their attack, their numbers can and will overwhelm us. Once their progress stops, the dragons will create a line of fire to prevent any further movement and cut their army in half. We will continue to rain fire on the dead using low-level flights to protect against the Walker Spear attacks. Once our battle plan becomes obvious, I believe Viserion will be used to attack the trenches or the dragons in the sky.
Jon then turned to Queen Daenerys.
Dragonfire cannot kill a dragon. What remains of Viserion will have to be killed by dragonglass, or his head removed from his body. It is very likely this will result in the death of one of our own dragons.
Once Viserion is destroyed, the Night King will be on foot. It is imperative that our soldiers understand the Walker's blades shatter steel. Dragonglass can kill them if you can get close enough. But Valyrian steel is what we need of our best swordsmen. Who here wields it?
Asked Jon.
I.
Responded Brienne and Jaime in unison.
Right here.
Announced Lady Arya, and Ser Jorah's eyes met Jon's as he proclaimed,
Aye. Your Grace, my father's sword could use a man worthy of wielding it. Are there any suggestions?
Asked Samwell. Jon scanned the crowd of the best swordsmen in the 7 kingdoms. He noted Sir Beric, Sandor Clegane, and finally rested on a skinny, unassuming man in the corner of the room.
Theon Greyjoy.
Jon responded. Theon thanked Jon with a simple nod of his head.
The dead do not retreat. If they reach the walls, Winterfell falls. They will be up and over in a matter of minutes. Should that happen, a cache of wildfire will be stored in the main hall. The women and children will wait out the storm in the hall. If retreat is ordered, the women will be evacuated by Lady Arya into the crypts, and the wildfire lit. If anyone sees wildfire ignited inside the castle walls, they are to abandon their position and flee south, because in 5 minutes' time the dragons will raise Winterfell upon exit.
Lamented Jon, and a sullen silence filled the room.
Your Grace.
Interrupting the silence was Lady Sansa, and Jon quickly cut her off.
Mankind's existence will not be tied to the fate of our childhood home. White Harbor will be our rallying point if needed, and that is all I shall say on the matter.
Tormund Giantsbane.
Asked Samwell Tarly. Tormund was slightly hungover from the wedding the night before he woke at the second calling of his name.
Any word from Munda?
Our scouting party ranged as far north as we dare. That's why we lost 3 men yesterday.
It's a shame, isn't it?
Inform your men and get some rest. We'll be sending out new scouting parties every 2 hours throughout the night. So we'll need to be in position within an hour's time of notice. I'd ask Lord Tyrion, Sir Jaime, and my family to remain behind.
Asked Jon, and a rush of whispers returned to the hall. The men and women filed out of the library as Bran had returned to his wheelchair and was pushed by Arya into a circle around Jon.
The Night King left symbols north of the wall. That's why Sam was asking about Tormund's daughter. We believe she can translate for us. All we know now is he wants to begin or end conflict or judgment. I was hoping Bran could help explain his intentions.
I have only theories. I cannot risk entering his mind.
Go on.
I think he wants to die, and the rest of us with him. It's really that simple.
So he can die?
Under the right circumstances.
Who does he see as his enemy?
Men, the children, and me.
Yourself specifically?
Yes. We've had conflict for many millennia, just never south of the wall before.
Where do you want to be, brother?
I'll stay in the main hall with Sansa. I can do my best work from there. I'll just need someone to wake me if we need to move quickly. I'll be on horseback.
Arya.
I'm fine with it. Leading the evacuation through the crypts.
Responded a disappointed Lady Arya. The crowd stood to leave the library, and Jon subtly stopped Arya from leaving.
You know what you might find down there.
Dead people.
Arya replied quickly and without thought. Jon attempted to acquire her full attention before responding.
Dead people you used to know.
Jon corrected, and Arya's face straightened with that realization. Sir Davos left the main hall to enjoy his traditional walk through the courtyard. He saw Lady Brienne briefing the Knights of the Vale, with Podrick at her side. He continued his tour to see Queen Daenerys embrace the captain of her guard, Ser Jorah Mormont. The reality of what was about to occur was finally setting in.
You're not allowed to die without the Queen's permission.
Sir Davos overheard her speak to Ser Jorah as he took her hands in his.
I promise to return to you, Khaleesi.
He said to her. Queen Daenerys turned to continue a conversation with Grey Worm. Sir Davos approached Ser Jorah as he was preparing his saddle.
The first Westerosian knight to lead a Khalisar into battle.
Aye, good men they are.
Admitted Ser Jorah. He peered over Ser Davos's shoulder. A young Lyanna Mormont was approaching the pair of knights. She handed a heavy breastplate to Ser Jorah, and he graciously accepted it. He then turned to face the light of the nearest torch.
My lady,
exclaimed Ser Jorah with breathless gratitude.
Welcome back to the family, Ser Jorah,
answered Lady Lyanna. Sir Davos could tell this armor meant something to Ser Jorah.
If you are to fall tonight, cousin, it will be with a bear on your breastplate. I wish you good fortune, sir.
And to you, my lady,
answered Ser Jorah. Sir Davos continued his tour of Winterfell up on the ramparts, where he met Lord Gendry.
Sir Davos,
exclaimed the young Lord of Storm's End.
Lord Gendry,
retorted the old knight.
Fine work down in the forges.
I just hope it will be enough.
The young smith admitted. The two men walked down the ramparts to find Lady Arya alone, sitting on a snow-covered stone.
May I be of assistance, milady?
Asked Lord Gendry. Sir Davos noticed she had commandeered an unsullied long spear and was attempting to affix a dragon-glass spearhead to its opposite end.
I never knew you were left-handed. Should have, considering needle is always on your right.
Lord Gendry nervously paused.
Come down to the armory and I'll show you how to attach it properly.
Gendry noticed her hands shaking. He sat in the snow next to her, almost forgetting Ser Davos was there. Lord Gendry then took her hands in his.
You're nervous.
Terrified, but I'm ready.
She admitted, and Gendry leaned forward, kissing her forehead and quietly whispered,
You're going to do fine.
He encouraged. Sir Davos noticed Lord Tyrion on the ramparts, and they slipped through the doorway and out of the young pair's sight. Sir Davos had constantly thought Lord Tyrion was avoiding his eye. Sir Davos planned to exit from his company when Lord Tyrion addressed him directly.
Sir Davos,
Exclaimed the Queen's Hand while avoiding eye contact.
I never properly apologized for the events surrounding your son's death.
Lord Tyrion paused and then uncomfortably attempted to continue. Sir Davos then spoke.
I certainly hope you haven't bared this burden for very long. My son is dead for one reason only. I should have led him to safety rather than to war. His death is my responsibility, not yours. There will never be a need to speak of this again, my Lord Hand.
As you wish, good sir.
Sir Davos watched as the sword called Heartsbane was presented to Theon. Sir Davos couldn't hear their conversation, so he just observed. An inspection of the sword by Theon, followed by a short conversation and a handshake as the two men departed. Lady Sansa and Theon held a long embrace, almost as kin, thought Sir Davos. This put a smile on the old man's face. A calming voice called out to Sir Davos from behind him. He then turned to greet Sir Beric, who was enjoying the same view.
Beautiful, isn't it?
And what's that?
Humanity.
Responded Sir Beric simply.
It is. I routinely observe the men the night before a battle. Reminds me of what we're fighting for. You think your Lord of Light wants us to be victorious?
Indeed I do.
Sir Beric paused while collecting his thoughts.
He is all that is life, warmth, and light.
Everything the dead are not.
Sir Davos finished his sentence.
Precisely. Win or lose, live or die, it is all as he wills it.
That's convenient.
Sir Davos paused. His disdain for the faith was bubbling to the surface.
How so?
It's the perfect way to avoid taking responsibility for what happens in your name.
Responded a sour Sir Davos.
We'll see if he proves you wrong tonight, Sir Davos.
Just then the war horn blew 3 times. The two men exchanged worried but determined looks and quickly departed. The commotion in the courtyard set the Onion Knight's nerves on edge. Sir Davos hurried into the Winterfell crypts. There he found Jon and Queen Daenerys. Sir Davos noticed the crypt was well lit, only compared to the one other time he had been down here. Jon had set the remains of Lyanna and Eddard Stark aflame. Queen Daenerys held her king at what seemed like a difficult moment for him.
I couldn't help them when they needed me. All I can do now is ensure their rest.
Lamented Jon to his own newlywed wife.
Your Grace, please excuse my intrusion.
Sir Davos apologized. The Queen never turned towards Sir Davos as she focused on her husband.
It's time.
Jon and Queen Daenerys climbed the staircase from the crypts that entered the main hall. Jon then met eyes with Samwell and Lady Sansa. He nodded to them in reassurance. Lady Sansa then stood to follow them out into the courtyard. Lord Varys then approached Queen Daenerys.
Your kingdom was never more in need of a savior than it is right now, Your Grace. I am pleased to say we have one equal to the task.
Finished Lord Varys. Jon escorted his wife into the bustling courtyard. Once the men and women saw their monarchs enter the yard, all motion stopped. The air was still, and a light snow was falling in the fresh silence.
High in the halls of the kings who are gone.
A voice rang out from atop the catwalk. Podrick Payne had begun a song.
Jenny would dance with her ghost.
Jon held out his hand to his queen as he pulled her close. The unsullied remaining tapped their spears into the ground in unison.
The ones she had lost and the ones she had found. and the ones who had loved her the most.
The king and queen danced in the Winterfell courtyard under the threat of their own imminent demise.
The ones who'd been gone for so very long, she couldn't remember their name.
The soldiers joined Podrick in the song. Soon their voices could be heard from outside the castle.
They spun her around on the damp old stone, spun away all her sorrow and pain.
Lady Arya took Gendry by the hand and led him to the center of the courtyard, and then Theon led Lady Sansa to join her family. Missandei met eyes with Grey Worm, and he took that as permission.
And she never wanted to leave, never wanted to leave.
The four couples danced under the snow and moonlight as they were serenaded by hundreds of soldiers.
Never wanted to leave, never wanted to leave.
Sir Jaime looked to Brienne and squeezed her hand twice. He expected her to be hesitant to the point of reluctance when Sir Jaime simply whispered in her ear,
I wouldn't ask you to dance, unless I meant it.
Never wanted to leave, never wanted to leave.
We'll get another chance, won't we?
Damn right we will.
answered Sir Jaime. Lady Brienne let out a nervous wail, but it was interrupted as Jaime kissed her.
Sir Beric, would you lead us in a prayer?
Asked Jon, and Sir Beric then bowed his head and spoke in a booming voice.
Mankind humbles itself before the old gods. We ask your will be done this night. We ask the Father to properly judge our dead. And to the Mother we ask for mercy in doing so. We pray to the Maiden to allow the love we witnessed this night to continue thereafter. And to the Crone we ask for wisdom in our struggle. We ask the Smith to strengthen our backs, and the Warrior to entrench our resolve. We ask the Stranger to properly ferry our dead onto judgment, and the drowned god's assistance in doing so. What is dead may never die. Lord of Light, let your will be known. We are forever your servants, and we remain faithful to the last. We ask for your protection from this night, for it is dark and full of terrors.
Jon simply closed the makeshift ceremony by announcing,
Fight for who you love, and love whom you fight for. You are all the shields that guards the realms of men.
Shouts and cheers erupted as the two dragon riders exited the courtyard. Queen Daenerys then looked to her husband.
So was our first dance planned?
It was, in fact. It just so happened to be Sansa's idea.
Jon revealed as they exchanged grins through the falling snow. Their dragons were mounted and grounded in front of each of the flanks. The Dothraki blood riders were growing impatient as fires were lit all over the fields. The Unsullied stood in perfect formations as the dead approached. Jon's eyes continuously shifted between the dimly lit horizon and the sky. Jon expected a wave of dead bodies to flood the trench at any moment. Replaying the events of Hardhome in his mind, he knew it would start with a storm. The moans and croaks of the army were finally within earshot. The snowfall had slowed and the breeze picked up. A single rider had approached the trench and steered its horse through the narrow choke point. He stopped in the middle of the field, surrounded on four sides by 12-foot walls of brush and spikes, and 3,000 Dothraki screamers in front of him. Jon watched intently from high atop Rhaegal. The last thing on earth Jon wanted to hear was uttered, his own name. "Jon!" called the rider. "Jon!" the rider repeated. Jon's heart was now beating out of his chest. He leaned forward on Rhaegal, but the dragon did not take flight. Rhaegal charged at the rider, leaping over the trench stakes to a thunderous boom that caused stirring of the Dothraki horses. "Jon," the rider continued. Rhaegal roared at the rider, dressed in black, hood up and riding a black horse. Jon dismounted Rhaegal and drew Blackfire as he approached the stranger. Drogon and Queen Daenerys landed beside him. She quickly dismounted and walked slightly behind Jon. Jon raised his sword a mere 20 feet from the rider.
You know my name. It's a pity I don't know yours.
But you do, nephew.
Said an eerily familiar voice as the rider lowered his hood, relieved Jon was to meet the lone rider.
Uncle Benjen.
Exclaimed an elated Jon as he lowered his sword. "Stop," his uncle cried.
I'm not here of my own free will, nephew.
I thought you were killed by them.
Not killed, but captured. I now represent the interests of the Night King.
He calls himself the Night King.
He is known by many names, milady. This is just the one you would recognize.
Explained Benjen with a serious tone. Jon was close to working out why his uncle was still among them.
What did he do to you?
He bent me to his will. His magic is strong. He prizes my services greatly. I'm the first follower he's had capable of speech in many millennia.
What does he want with us?
A great many things, but his immediate request is you, your brother, and your queen.
He can have me.
Jon offered without thinking. He was now a married man and the rightful king of these kingdoms. It was odd now that he thought of it, almost as if his life was no longer his own.
He expected this, but his requirement is all three, or you can opt for oblivion.
Answered Benjen. Queen Daenerys then took his arm and Jon refused her look.
I won't sacrifice you for anyone or anything. He wants conflict. He marched on the right castle. Our way is the old way.
Jon whispered, though his tone was quite serious.
Old indeed, nephew. But my master is quite older.
Can you deliver a message for me, uncle?
I can.
Replied Benjen, and Jon remembered his last conversation before his uncle's prolonged disappearance.
Tell him, here in my north, a man gets what he earns, when he earns it.
Whispered Jon, and Benjen laughed. The smile on his face was immediately wiped off, and Jon thought he looked to be in pain. The look vanished as quickly as his smile. Benjen then recovered himself.
Then there is nothing more to be discussed.
He breathed. Uncle Benjen shifted his reins to leave when Jon demanded his attention.
Did you know?
Jon asked regarding the events surrounding his birth. He purposely kept the question vague, for the incompleteness was part of the inquiry.
About you? Of course, why do you think I joined the Night's Watch? Ned told me upon his return from the war. We agreed I would take the Black to ensure we wouldn't both die in the same conflict. That kept the circle small.
I will free you, Uncle.
My dear nephew, I'm no longer part of the realms of men, and therefore I'm no longer your responsibility.